Just a heads up before we start this episode, in this podcast, I am sharing my personal story. As a healthcare practitioner, I am qualified to talk about this stuff, but it's heavy. The medical information I will share should not be considered legal health advice to you specifically, so please talk to your health team for guidance on your own health. All right, hey lovers, I'm Carlen Costa, and this is the Spicy Fat Podcast. I'm so happy to be here today. It's episode 2. This is really exciting. This is a big deal for me, and honestly, after recording episode 1, I was super nervous on that first episode, but I had so much fun, and today I'm feeling really calm in my heart. I'm feeling really supported. Producer Sarah is here in the podcast space with me, in the episode space with me. We're hanging out, talking about where we want to go, what we want to do with this. And I've been sitting with what do I want to use my voice for? What do I want to use this platform for? And this is really why I created the Spicy Fat Podcast. It's about amplifying my voice, my story, but also your stories and the relatable content, the relatable stories, the relatable feelings that we share as a collective. And today we're going to get into a pretty big relatable topic for so many people, not only in Canada, but around the world. This story is a little bit of a doozy in my life. And I'll probably get emotional. I'm not gonna lie. I got my tissues ready. I'm excited, but I'm also doing my best to hold space for myself as I go through pages of notes for things that I really want to share with you today. So, if you're ready, let's take a nice big deep breath in through your nose. Out through your mouth. All right, lovers, here we grow. So here is a topic that I know one too many of you relate to, which is, were you the fat kid? Yeah, because I was the fat kid. Literally, it was interesting because I had a lot of friends. I had, a really wonderful community around me. But still, being the fat kid came with some bullshit. I'm not gonna lie. It came with a huge amount of discomfort, even if you did have friends, Kids are pretty cruel, and I think today kids still can be pretty cruel. But the kids that were around me, kind of would call me names behind my back, to my face sometimes. And it was interesting, it was interesting trying to navigate that as a kid, not knowing any better, and being in a world that really catered to thin privilege. People would also look upon me and they would pity me. And that was also really hard to digest as a kid, because adults especially would say to me, "You have such a beautiful face. If only your body looked like this, looked like some sort of ideal that honestly a teenager, a tween, should never have to consider." So I learned how to compensate. I learned how to compensate because my body felt like such a barrier. I read books. I dedicated myself to school. I dedicated myself to friends, to community. I was involved in so many different levels of my community. I invested in accessories to distract from my body. To this day, I really love wearing hats. I really love jewelry. I really love accessories that you can wear, because there was no cute clothes for me as a kid. A really great store that came into Canada from the US was Torrid. It's still around today. I love it. It is an incredible shop for plus size bodies And but it didn't come into Canada. I think it was like the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. So like I had to wear momish clothes from like Pennington's that never fit right because my body wasn't that of a woman. It was still that of an awkward young lady, of a kid. Until one day, all of that changed. One day, I found myself sitting in a medical office wearing my favorite red dress. Oh, I still remember this dress. It was like cherry red. It had these tiny little black polka dots on it. It had this deep V. It wrapped around my waist and it swished and swang in the wind as I walked. And that day that I was wearing this dress, I made a decision that altered my life for the next 15 years. Are you ready for my story? Then let's grow. We're doing that today. We're doing that today. In 2005, I was 25 years old, and my parents decided to spend $25,000 in a medical office in Toronto for me. Because prior to this moment, my family had a meeting. And I'm not talking about like my parents' family. I'm talking about my aunts, my uncles, family members had a meeting about me. And their concern was about how to address my fatness. They decided that we needed to find a less invasive option to deal with my fatness. We needed to find a solution for my fatness. And before I get into more details of the story, I do want to preface this by saying I don't hate them. And I don't have any anger now. Because I do know that they were all doing the best they could with what they knew. But I also know that one of the challenges of some of the people that surrounded me, is that they also struggled with their own love and acceptance for themselves, but especially for me, because I came from a super gorgeous family, and it was really, really hard being the fat one. So on this day in 2005, 25 years old, red polka dot dress, it was a sunny day. I'm sitting in this office with my parents, knowing that my family had this meeting about how to resolve this issue, this familial concern, which was my fatness, because I was the fattest woman in my family. We decided to sign up for weight loss surgery. In particular, laparoscopic gastric band surgery. So to give you a little bit of context as to kind of, the history or the medical relationship of this particular surgery, of gastric banding surgery. I looked up, what my government says, how do we regulate this stuff here in Canada. And in 2011, Canada was reporting that 1 in 4 adults in Canada were obese. So they offered and allowed for a variety of weight loss treatments and surgeries to be performed. And surgery was recommended for morbidly obese people with a BMI of 40. Now, for context, for where I was sitting at that time in my life, I was 25, about 270 pounds, 5'7", so my BMI was 42.3, which made me, I guess, a legally, medically viable candidate for surgery because the BMI suggested that I was morbidly obese. So my family looked into this option for me. And, the government website even says gastric banding is a minimally invasive procedure. It only requires a few small openings in the abdomen. And what a laparoscopic gastric band looks like is it's a silicone device that sits just below like the base of the esophagus and the top of the stomach to create a pouch about the size of a golf ball. You know how small a golf ball is, right? So that's what the band does. And it acts as like a stopper to your stomach. But let me tell you that when people said that this was a minimally invasive procedure, sure, the procedure may have been, I guess, slightly invasive. I really need to figure out how they like measure what is invasive and what is, what is not. I really need to figure that out. But this wasn't not invasive at all. Because over time, this surgery almost killed me. A few times, actually. So how it worked was when you would eat, your esophagus would fill, and it would fill into that little golf ball pouch also at the base of your esophagus and at the top of your stomach. So that when food came in, it would slowly release into your stomach for digestive purposes. But so that you would feel full, it would fill up your esophagus. And how you would regulate how much food could come in and out through that like golf ball size and into your stomach was this band that was around my stomach. Also had a line and a port that sat on the side of my body. And every few months, I would have to go and see a nurse and have it filled with saline solution. And this saline solution would regulate and restrict the amount of food that could be eaten. The Government of Canada website talks about some of the risks of this surgery. So some of the reported risks at the time of this publishing were things like the band could wear away through the stomach wall. The band itself could tear, leak, or come apart. The outlet to your stomach could be blocked if you didn't chew small enough bites or chew thoroughly enough. The band could also slip and move from its correct position. And in fact, a few of these things over time did happen to me. I'm going to come back to some of that in a minute. But I sat in that office, to be honest, not fully aware of these risks, not fully aware of how I would have to shift my life. So I'm sitting in this office and I was given the decision to partake in this surgery or not. And I'm not going to lie to you, as a 25-year-old, I was so desperate to be thin. I was so desperate to be thin for everything I thought that meant. And at the time, I was under the impression that that was the only health option I had. For my health is how it was framed. To be healthy, to be healthier. At the time, my body actually was aching, but my heart was also aching. And my mind felt like a tornado. I needed a dependable response with dependable results. And at the time, it felt like the most dependable, non-invasive, healthy option that I could partake in. So I went for it. I said yes while wearing that red dress. The prep for this surgery still haunts me a little bit to this day. I'm not going to lie to you. I have learned through this work that I do now in supporting other clients who have gone through similar procedures as I have, as well as just, educating myself on how weight loss surgeries have changed and shifted over the years. But for me at the time, the prep was over the course of 2.5 weeks. It may have even been 3 weeks. All I was allowed to eat for 2.5 weeks was cottage cheese and yogurt for every single meal. I think I was actually only allowed to have like one chicken breast at one time because I was just so tired and so lethargic. I was just so like emotional about having my intake limited in such a way. But the doctors told me, you have to do this in order to prepare for surgery, in order to prepare your liver, I guess, to remove fat from the liver. And I'm not going to lie to you, to this day, fuck cottage cheese. Like, I can't actually eat cottage cheese. I can barely look at cottage cheese at this time in my life. And this is 15 years later. So I did it. I did the prep. I cried a lot because it was already such a trauma that I was experiencing in my body, but wasn't able to identify what it was. And then I went into the surgery. And I had the surgery. And me, my immediate family, my extended family, everyone was so excited for me because we felt like we finally had found a solution to my problem. Over the next 2 years, I lost about 150 pounds. 150 pounds is the size of the average adult woman. Like, it is a healthy size of a human. In fact, I would joke with people about how I lost a person. What I didn't realize at the time that I know now is that that person that I lost was actually a part of me that I put away. When you lose that much weight, they don't talk about how much you have to adjust, how much you have to adjust emotionally, but also how much you have to adjust physically. I can think back and remember how I literally had to relearn how to walk because my balance was so off. I was also experiencing lethargy, like just exhaustion in bouts. And it was interesting to kind of relearn how to human again in this new body that was revealing itself. My body shrank, but the interesting part was that my appetite remained. And I didn't really know how to deal with that. I didn't know how to understand what that was about, what this craving was about. And the other thing about lap band surgery that they don't tell you is that when your esophagus effectively becomes your stomach, if you are struggling with appetite, if you are struggling with wanting, if you are struggling with binging and overeating, for so many different reasons that we do this, so many different reasons, and I cannot wait to uncover with you through this journey of this podcast why some of those reasons happen, because they aren't actually exactly what you think they are. But one of the things that happened to me is because I didn't understand these cravings that I had, I would eat and then I would purge. And that became the cycle. I looked great, but it took me an hour to eat so I could actually ingest the calories I needed to survive. Because if I ate too fast, I would puke immediately. There would be days that I'd be sitting at a dinner table and I would literally have to excuse myself rapidly because it was just going to go down and come back up. So whenever I was in public or around other people, I ate very slowly and more often than not went very hungry. But I learned, or rather my body learned, how to continue to be hungry and how to be okay with being hungry. My body shrank, but my appetite remained. And everyone around me was happy. Everyone around me looked at me with such joy. They felt that it was empowering. They felt, I think, empowered that something was finally working. That was, I'm going to be really honest with you. It was relieving to me. It was so relieving to me. When you are the fat kid, your entire life. Whew, sorry team, I'm getting a little emotional here, you know? To finally have an opportunity to look behind the curtain at how everyone else lives, at how normal people live. I was happy to how I understood and related to happiness at that time too. The interesting part though is that when you have a hard family, and a hard family to sometimes be a part of, how sometimes we go about protecting ourselves is by making some good decisions around chosen family. And oh my goddess, do I have an incredible chosen family. I love my chosen family beyond this life and all others. And I had a couple close friends who were actually concerned about me because they witnessed me almost daily through that time. One of my best friends Sarah, who I love so very much, actually hated what she was witnessing. She was living with me in and out during that time also. And she still to this day calls my experience a medical eating disorder. She hated it because she would see the cycle. She would see the eat and purge cycle in real life. My first boyfriend, which was in university, actually broke up with me after hearing me violently purge because I was so sad and so hungry and all I wanted to do was eat. He heard me struggle in that, and God bless him, he couldn't be part of it. And that was okay. You know, it was okay. And I actually understood that. But that was the dark side to what I was experiencing. A few years later, within a couple years, I had to have surgery again because the port, remember how I said the band goes around your stomach and your esophagus, and then there's like a cord and a port that they fill with saline solution in order to tighten or release the entry into the full stomach. I had to have surgery to move the port because they had originally placed it beside my belly button. But every time I tried to be active, because I started getting thin. I started to be able to move my body again in a way that felt fun. But it would pull, you know, anytime I went into like a yoga move or a stretch, I could feel the pull on my stomach, pulling my organs down and around. So I had to have a surgery to move the port from my navel to under my ribs. And then 13 years later, I finally started to address the actual problem. Sorry, I'm just adjusting. I just realized I looked at my face and I have mascara all over my face. Okay, here we go. Because I'm going to tell you the truth. There actually is a happy ending to this story. Okay, there is a happy ending to this story, but it took me 13 years to get there. In 2021, in the summer of 2021, I had it removed. I had that lap band removed because I no longer could. I no longer could function with it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why. But I'm going to start with the history lesson as to how this procedure even came to be. So I read this study, a 2023 study, and it's called Laparoscopic Gastric Band Placements by Saras, Acho, and Prakash. And this study outlines that the first adjustable gastric band was placed in 1985. Laparoscopic, so changing it from a full-on invasive surgery of putting in this band changed into being a laparoscopic, less invasive form of the surgery in 1993. This surgery was approved in the US in 2001, but it really became popular and took off in Europe and Australia in the 90s. And when we're looking at weight loss surgery and the different types of weight loss surgery, there's really two primary mechanisms that bariatric surgery allows a patient, or how bariatric surgery allows a patient to lose weight, which is restriction, which refers to limiting caloric intake, or malabsorption, which refers to alterations to bypassing functions and decreases the absorption of ingested nutrients. Things like gastric sleeve that we do now, where they actually like cut the stomach or staple the stomach, that type of surgery is a malabsorption mechanism. The lap band is a restrictive mechanism. So it limits how much I can intake. And in that summer of 2021, I was done with being restricted in like probably every aspect of my life. I was done with being restricted in terms of my body, my relationships. I mean, we were literally in the middle of a pandemic in 2021, and I was just kind of like done because the world was shifting. I could see the world was shifting, and then I could see myself responding to it in that way. So I told my family, I said, listen, friends, family, there's something happening in my body and I need to have this removed. And what's interesting is that what a few of them said back when I told them? When I told them that this procedure that I had 13 years ago was making attempts on my life, and I outlined that to them, some of them responded with, well, what happens if you get fat again? That was their concern. And there were moments leading up to my removal where I had to reconcile being fat or being dead. And that's the truth. Because I actually did almost chicken out in having it removed. But then one too many nights, it literally almost killed me in the middle of my nights. Obesity Canada reports that adjustable gastric banding, the procedure itself, has long-term results, but most surgeons have stopped performing this procedure, especially in Canada. And that's interesting. The clinic that I even went to go get this done in no longer exists. And I didn't even get like an email that it no longer exists. I never got a follow-up. I got none of that. Because after a while, I actually started distancing myself from that clinic. But I did find out later that the clinic was shut down and potentially for some malpractice kind of stuff. I'm not entirely sure, but we'd have to look into that. Because there's a part of me, as I was reconciling, should I have this removed or not, that also had to forgive myself because I felt really, really guilty. After my success, the success of losing 150 pounds with this surgery, I actually know of 3 other women who had it based on my results. And when I would spend time with them, I would watch them eat in agony. It was such an interesting mirror experience because I would watch them be in pain. I would watch them eat in agony. And they would look at me wondering why it was so easy for me. But how I ate had changed by then. How I ate had to change. I had to eat more smaller portions. And if I got too excited and I got too loud and I got too involved in the conversations and the dinner and the meal sharing and I would eat too fast, then I would have to effectively purge on command. Or if I actually wanted to eat because I was hungry, it would take me an hour. And I would make the excuse and tell people who I never wanted to disclose that I had this surgery, because for so long, I didn't tell anybody that I had this surgery. It was my little secret, my little miracle that I didn't want anyone else to be a part of. But I would tell them that it would take me an hour to eat because it was better for my digestion. I got used to eating cold food because it took me so long to eat. And then food was no longer fun until really a few years later, and I felt like I had lost enough weight. I stopped getting my port filled and decided I was thin enough. At one point, actually, I was so thin that I've looked back on some pictures recently and I look like a bobblehead on what is supposed to be a thick body. I am a hips kind of woman. You know what I mean? So to have this like beautiful floating face and head on this body with big hips, but it didn't really look like it matched. Leading up to 2021, because of my lap band, when I tell you that it literally killed me, it's because in the middle of the night, one too many times, I had come close to suffocating on my stomach acid while I slept. Because that's what would happen, is that I had to learn that if I ate too late at night because I was actually hungry, if I did that, I would wake up coughing and choking on food. I had to sleep on an angle for 13 years so that I wouldn't choke and suffocate. But sometimes I would forget. In 2017, I was actually hospitalized for a month because I had aspirated food into my lungs unknowingly. When I arrived at the hospital, they didn't know what was going on. In fact, they told my partner at the time that I had cancer or tuberculosis because the infection was so bad. They actually ended up telling my partner and my family that they may have to prepare for my passing over the Rainbow Bridge because they had no idea what was going on with my body. I can still taste the infection in my mouth as the antibiotics broke the baseball-size infection in my lungs, and I coughed up bowls of infectious cells. It was really freaking gross. I don't think I've ever seen a nurse grossed out, but I saw a few nurses really grossed out because that's how I was able to get the infection out of my body. If it wasn't going to break naturally due to antibiotics, then they were going to have to go through my ribs into my lungs and have it removed. And still, in 2017, apparently that wasn't enough for me or for any of the people who were so invested in my thinness. It took me to 2021 to realize that I don't want to die because everyone else needs me to be thin. I want to live. And I want it to be in a body that makes me happy, however I look and feel. And this brings me to today. Because after that surgery that I had to elect on my own, I had to ask a friend to drop me off and pick me up. I had to do that on my own. Because I didn't have a lot of support. And within a year of that removal, of course, I gained 50 pounds. And I was actually in the best shape of my life at that time. I was doing CrossFit like 4 times a week. I was strong. Like I was like lifting like 150 pounds over my head with ease. The same amount of weight that I had lost off my body. But within a year of removal, when I had gained 50 pounds, I really had to dig deep. I really had to go in to reconciling the relationship with my body. And it has been and was especially an emotional roller coaster. But I'm not going to lie to you now, this day, now, 2-3 years later, I am actually the happiest I have ever been in such a long time. Probably happiest that I've ever been in my life. And I'm 40 and I'm fat. And I'm so happy. Because the removal allowed me to eat again. It allowed me to enjoy again. It allowed me to live again. Because everything is no longer centered around how to eat, when planning to eat, and eating enough so that I don't faint, which happened one too many times. It also revealed a huge part of me that had been hidden my entire life. So no, I'm not mad any longer. I could be, but I'm not. Because I had my lap band removed so that I could learn that I had a beautiful brain. I could learn that my spiciness was no longer this trauma that followed me, that the spiciness that I had was something called ADHD. And it took me for such a magical carpet ride. Because when you can't feel your body, you have no idea what's going on in your head either. And in the time after my surgery, after the removal of my surgery in 2021, I had to decide to shut out all the noise. I had to cocoon myself to reconcile what I had just allowed myself to go through for the previous 13 years. I had to shut out all the have-tos, all the obligations, and I had to stop shooting all over myself. And instead, to heal from my experience, I leaned in. I noticed myself. I grew a relationship with my body. I learned how, why, and when it wanted food, and the expanded version of stimulation seeking, which was actually due to a lack of dopamine that I didn't know. And to be fair, no one else knew either. Because the research on ADHD had not yet caught up to recognize women and young girls as part of this presentation. All my life, I've been craving and made to feel so guilty for it. So instead of questioning why I was craving, instead of judging my cravings, I shut that judgment and that guilt down. I shut that shit down and I reverted back. Or rather, I didn't revert, actually. I think I need to change that word. I shifted into relearning how to actually embrace my body, how to have a relationship with self, and not just the ego of self or the soul of self, but the me, the now, the present, all of the pieces of me put together that exist right now, that are talking to you right now. Because after the surgery, after the removal, I could feel again. My body felt lighter, less restricted, obviously less restricted. And I leaned in. And I'm not going to lie to you. At first, like I can't make this be like a sunshine and rainbows story that like I got the removal and then all of a sudden all my life problems were solved. They weren't, because I was about to embark on a whole other new journey now. And it was related to my beautiful spicy brain. But before I could recognize even that I had a spicy brain, I got very angry. Like, so angry. I was so very, very angry because the biggest relationship in my life was laden with betrayal that I was forced to heal. And that was the relationship with myself. I had betrayed myself and parts of myself. And I'm not going to lie to you, she was pissed. She was so mad. that I had put her away and locked her away for 13 years. So she was going to come through hard, and that part of me was going to reveal herself over the next 2 years. So on the next episode, actually, we're going to talk about that journey. We're going to talk about the couple years that followed the removal of my surgery. And we're going to talk about ADHD. We're going to talk about how I came into my diagnosis, how I relate to it, what I'm doing now to help others understand it as a late diagnosed woman, how I'm advocating for myself, how I'm advocating for my clients, how I'm really trying to shape the opportunity and present opportunities for other people to also find themselves and learn about themselves. This is why I'm doing this podcast. You know, this is why I'm doing the Spicy Fat podcast. This is part of what I'm doing now in order to reconcile my own personal betrayal, but also as part of my mission now to help and support other women like me, whether you got bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, or whether you're just a fat girl with a spicy brain, or whether you're just a woman or human, I don't care what gender you are, I'm not going to lie to you, whether you are just a human who is trying to connect the relationship they have with their brains and with their bodies, and trying to build a bridge between the two. So if you're listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for holding my story with kindness. Thank you for holding my tears that I shared with you today with kindness. And I'm also going to send myself, as I look at myself in the camera right now, I'm also going to send myself a little extra special thank you to me. Because I'm alive. And I'm thriving. Because I didn't give up, babes. I did not give up. And I didn't settle. I chose me first. I chose me above all else and everyone else. And I am proud as fuck to myself for it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing me. Thank you for reflecting. I hope you're hearing this story, and if it is hitting you in the heartstrings, please take a moment to take a few deep breaths, to reflect, to talk and connect to the people that you love. And I hope that this inspires you and ignites you to maybe lean in to yourself a little bit stronger at this time. I love you guys. Stay spicy, lovers, and take care of one another.